Shalom, everyone, and welcome back to Reservations. I'm Jeremy Blair.
And I'm Rain Whalen. Jesus.
Yeah.
So before we jump into everything, let's address the elephant in the room. Jeremy recently had a birthday.
I did.
How was your birthday, buddy?
It was all right. I spent 8 hours of it installing Windows.
What?
Yeah, so Haley's parents were in town. He had a job lined up for a coworker of ours to get new Windows in. That's what he does for a living. And so we helped him install Windows for 8 hours. Yeah. I'm very sore.
This is a great way to spend your birthday.
Yeah.
Your 29th birthday.
It was fine. I don't usually do anything for my birthday most of the time. So it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, the biggest elephant in the room is we're not together right now.
No.
Unfortunately, my wife tested positive for COVID. Luckily, this is her last day of quarantine, but well, as of this recording, it's last day. But we still wanted to play it safe. So if you're watching, yeah, we're not in the same room. But I didn't even have to say that. The listeners probably think we are in the same room.
That's right. I mean, the listeners are probably like, they think that we're inseparable. The listeners do,
I mean, we are, but but they don't know that, they think that we could be sitting right next to each other.
Now, let me ask you this. Why didn't you say that Ashley got her tickets to the Backstreet Boys reunion?
Oh, because when I was making that joke, it was during a time which I thought that maybe our videos on YouTube wouldn't be seen, but then I learned that every time when I upload our videos, it asks if this is appropriate for children. And I mean, we're not really talking about anything bad, but we are swearing. So I usually press no, it's not made for children. And so it age restricts our videos.
Really?
So yeah, so unless someone is subscribed to the channel, they'll never know when we post a video. So after that, I was just like, all right, screw it. So
I didn't know that. Maybe that's why we have so few views on these things. We got to get kids in on this.
So we're just saying we got to start pandering to kids now?
No, I'm just saying that we should take off the age restriction.
Well, see, I thought about that. Well, see, and there's a section, and I need to go through and redo all the videos, but there's a section that I can put that, yes, this isn't made for kids, but there shouldn't be an age restriction.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, we got the, we got the explicit thing on the podcast. I'm sure we could do the same for here, but it's like, no, we're not talking Bluey. We're not talking.
I love that your mind went right to Bluey.
Yeah, we're not talking Bluey. We're not talking, like Good Burger all the time, but
dude, Good Burger.
Yeah, Good Burger is amazing. That's a future episode. But what I was saying is, like, we're talking about films that, a lot of times are very important. And I think that, kids should be able to, swearing be darned. I think that they should be able to watch these. So
I should start recording my voice of like censoring ourselves, but rather like, right when I would say like, hang on, no, like right when you or I would say like fuck or something, it would censor. And so you'd see our mouths mouth it, but then you'd hear like darn.
We would have to like overdub ourselves.
Oh, dude, that would take so long. Like
they do for TV shows or movies being shown on television.
It's like watching The Breakfast Club on CBS.
Yeah. I recently, we've been rewatching Community, and
nice.
There's someone mentions, I heard that, by the way, your computer had it, or was it mine? Oh shit, that was probably mine. I don't know. It was an email. So there's surely, have you seen Community?
Yeah, I mean, I've never finished it, but yeah, I've watched it. And
they were talking about Pulp Fiction, and she goes, "Oh my god, I love that." She's a very religious, very wholesome person, so she's like, "Oh, I've seen that movie. I love it. It's I saw it in an airplane. It's a 30-minute movie about two guys talking about burgers, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, because that's so funny. I don't think I made it to that one, but yeah,
that one's good.
But unfortunately, we are not talking about a 30-minute video about two guys talking about burgers.
No.
Today we're actually we're kind of ending the season. Well, I mean, this isn't the end of the season, but this is the final pick before our end of season series, with a pretty I wouldn't say it's a pretty heavy-handed movie, but it is a pretty heavy movie in terms of subject matter.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
We are talking about The Devil All the Time. I have never seen any other movie from this director, but when I saw the cast list, I was sold. We got
back when I was like a senior in high school, and I would watch like movie trailers on YouTube constantly. One of the ones that I was really interested in, I never saw, I guess there's still time, was After School. It's with Ezra Miller, and
nice.
It was his first movie, and he catches a girl either being murdered or just dying on camera, and he doesn't know. It's like he doesn't know what to do with the footage, right? It's one of those, and it was by this director.
Okay.
When I went back the other night to look to see who the director was, I was like, "Oh, After School! I've seen that trailer, a few times."
I've seen that trailer.
I've seen that trailer.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen anything from him, and I really enjoyed this. I know critics were kind of iffy about it, but I really like, because one of their critiques was the tone, because the movie is. I mean, we've talked about bleak movies on the podcast before. I would say The Road, our bleakest movie.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. I would say so. But this movie is bleak because we're dropped into this world that is essentially surrounded by just bad people. Everyone in this world, apart from a few, everyone is just bad.
Yeah.
And it all seems to converge around one character, Arvin, played by Tom Holland, where it's almost like he is the only, I wouldn't say pure, but he's the only good person surrounded by all these evil people.
Arvin seems to be sort of someone who can, think a little outside the box in terms of, especially religion, for sure. He is not one for religion. And so, which of course, if Arvin, you get it, right? You've seen what his childhood was like with religion. You saw what it's doing to his stepsister and his grandmother. So, and religion is sort of like this very specific yet nondescript religion is heavily prevalent in this film, but also it's not taken. This is not a religious movie. It's a movie really sort of denouncing this way of thinking, in terms of this extremist way of thinking.
I was telling Ashley, because she watched it with me, is that the movie really focuses on how extreme acts of, well, not necessarily extreme acts, but extreme faith, what that can do to a person. And as I think we mentioned it last week, this is based on a book. And the writer's not trying to say that like religion's bad, but how you said it, this way of thinking, this very extremist, faith-driven thinking, that's what's bad.
Yeah, I agree. But before we get into that, Let's talk about what the movie's about.
Yeah, because I think the title is a little misleading.
You think so?
Just a little.
Okay. So
Jeremy, what is this movie?
Well, the thing I love about this movie is the interconnectedness of it all, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, let's start with Willard. We can do a really short one, I guess, a really fast one. So, the movie starts off with Willard coming back from the war. He has sort of a crisis of faith, as it were, when he was in World War II, while seeing one of the Marines he was with crucified overseas, which was wild.
Which was happening. The Japanese soldiers were taking American prisoners of war and crucifying them,
which is insane.
Isn't that what essentially Martin Scorsese's film Silence is all about?
I mean, it's not about that, but yeah, I mean, there's some of that imagery in Silence. Future episode, I really like that one.
Yeah. Anyway,
so when he comes back from the war, he's not the most religious person anymore. In a very religious town. Of let me see if I can remember the name of it.
He lives in Mead.
He lives in Mead, or it's Knockemstiff.
Knockemstiff
is the other one.
Hang on, give me 1 second.
That's where the two places. I think it's Mead, West
talking.
Virginia, Knockemstiff, Ohio, or it's the opposite. It's Knockemstiff, West Virginia, and Mead, Ohio.
I think you're right, but here I will double check. The benefit of doing this over Zoom is we can quickly double check. Yeah. So he passes through on his way home to Coal Creek, West Virginia. He passes through Mead. And then they settle when he marries Charlotte. They settle in Knockemstiff.
Got it. Okay, so he meets Charlotte. He meet. It's sort of like a cute, way of being at a diner, and yeah, thank you. But we also meet another couple at that diner. We meet Carl and Sandy at that diner as well. And coincidentally, they meet at the same time. So Carl meets Sandy the same day, at the same moment, basically, that
Willard
Charlotte meets Willard, right? Which is cool. I like that parallel. And he, like, Willard's going to church with his mother and his uncle. I had a hard time understanding that dynamic, but that's fine.
Well, I mean, you kind of said it while we were kind of talking off mic a little bit. Is it's very Southern Baptist kind of thing, that his mother lives with her brother,
right?
Which
is not Willard's dad; it's Willard's
uncle. Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so this one's hard. This one's hard to do this fast because it's I don't know if we can. I don't know if we can do it fast because there's too much interconnectedness.
Well, we can at least get through the prologue, the flashback, because then Willard and Charlotte get married and have a kid, Arvin, and as I mentioned,
that's one of the things I like about this is that it goes fast, right? Like I don't have to watch them fall in love. I don't have to watch them get married. I don't have to, right? It's just like the next scene, they have a kid and they're getting a house, right?
Yeah, and then this is when Willard sort of rediscovers his faith. Something about the woods behind their house that they rent, just he finally finds the urge to start praying again and to start being more faith driven. Which is I mean, I've heard people that this happens to people in real life, so it's not it's not too outlandish that he finally rediscovers his faith.
Right, and it starts to ramp up quite a bit when Charlotte gets sick, right? She gets cancer.
Yeah, which we fast forward 9 years, because now Arvin is 9.
Yeah, well, it's 7 years, because if
that's right. Yeah, because if he's 2 in 1950,
right, because Lenora is born
in 1950,
and they're 2 years apart. So
yeah, so then that means Arvin's 2
right.
in 1950. So then 1957, he's 9. So okay, so
because that's when they find Helen's body too. I know it's a lot. So,
and there's a lot of characters in this movie.
There is, and it's sort of like Magnolia, right?
Yeah,
where you kind of have to have a chart.
Shout out to our Magnolia episode.
Yeah, shout out to Magnolia. God, I love that movie. So, Charlotte gets sick, and Willard really starts to ramp up the religion and the prayer and what would later he would try sacrifices, like the dog.
Yeah,
that was wild, right?
Yeah, Ashley, that was her least favorite part. Of course, me having already seen this movie, I'm over it. I'm like, it sucks. Your peace. Yeah, I was like, you know what, it still sucks, but you know what? Yeah, it's all good. She was like, oh, because she didn't know what he was gonna do, and then when they do such a good job of knowing, like, oh, he's about to sacrifice the dog. It's, we're following him and the dog go to the barn. He's feeding the dog, chicken or something. And she was just like, is he gonna kill the dog? And I was like, just keep watching.
He's not just gonna kill the dog. Anyway.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, not just gonna kill the dog.
Yeah, no.
But
so okay. And so once there's a scene that I really like in this, when those poachers were sort of giving him a hard time about, him not being with his wife at the moment. So let's go rape the wife, I guess.
Within earshot. Yeah.
That classic thing that, hillbillies do. And instead of acting right then and there, he waits until they're vulnerable. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And of course that sticks with Arvin later on.
Yep. Yeah. That's a big lesson for Arvin, of finding your moment.
Yeah.
And Bill Skarsgård beats the piss out of those dudes.
Yeah, he does. Oh man. And of course Arvin will do the same later.
Oh hell yeah.
And so once Charlotte dies, this is a big deal. So when Charlotte dies, a few hours later, Willard kills himself.
Right? Yes. And I don't think it was premeditated. I think it was sort of he saw, as the narrator goes on to say that, Willard had to follow wherever Charlotte went.
Yeah.
I think he, when he's telling Arvin, we're going to go see your grandma for a little bit. I think he was being genuine. I think he was like, I don't want to be anywhere your mother's not. Mm-hmm. But I think Arvin sort of understandably not wanting to be around his father anymore. That's when he was kind of like, well, then I guess I'll just kill myself then.
Yeah.
And he does.
Yeah. And crucifies the dog.
Well, he'd already crucified the dog.
Yeah. He'd already crucified the dog, but I love the reveal,
that we're seeing it through. Spoiler alert. Sebastian Stan is in the movie.
Yep.
We see it through his eyes. And I love when he's asking 9-year-old Arvin, like, what the hell is this? It's a prayer log, but it don't work too good. And there's just this crucified dog, and he's just like, what the fuck?
Dude, the accents were killing Haley
when
she would walk in. Because
really?
Well, because she had only ever seen Tom Holland in Spider-Man, and she only ever seen Robert Pattinson in Twilight. And so she's watching this and she goes, what's happening? So anyway, okay. So here's a favorite thing of mine that I love about this style of writing that the author is doing in the narration. By the way, the author is the narrator.
Yes.
Yeah.
which I thought was
he's from Knockemstiff.
Well, I think he's from around that area.
Oh,
but
yeah,
he's from Ohio.
From there. He may have grown up in Knockemstiff, I think, or was born there.
Yeah, I told Ashley, I was like, that is a real place, and I just can't believe there is a real city in the United States called Knockemstiff.
Yeah,
like so,
it's
it's
a silly name.
And someone was because that has to have some sort of backstory, like, oh, it'll knock him stiff or some bullshit like that.
That's silly. So there's a few moments in the narration that I love, and it's when Carl and Sandy meet. He in a way spoils it for us who they are and what they're going to do, right? But it's in a really interesting way because he doesn't say, oh, and they'll be murderers. It's they would later call their victims models, and he would later call her the bait, right?
And she would call him the shooter,
right? And, it's a fun way to do that, and then it sets us up for later on
that
and especially with Helen too.
Oh yeah,
saying that something around they wouldn't find her body for 7 years.
Yeah, because it's right when she gives Lenora to Grandma, and he says this will be the last. Little did she know this would be the last time she ever saw Lenora. They wouldn't find her body until 7 years later.
Right, and I like that. I like that it's almost like an epilogue, but before it, we're not there yet. And we're gonna get there eventually, right?
Right. Yeah, because there's still so much more movie. By the time Tom Holland comes into the fold, Ashley was she's like, how much more movie do we have left? And I paused it, and then there's still like an hour and 15 minutes, and she was like, oh my god. I was like, we're not done yet.
In that time. And of course, there's something about the audience knowing something and the characters not, right? Like knowing what happened to Roy. No one besides the three of them will ever know what happened to Roy, right?
When Lenora's like, do you think it's weird that we both end up being orphans in the same house? And he goes, well, you may not be an orphan, your daddy may come over that hill dancing a jig.
Right. And see there, there's something about us knowing that he's dead, right? And this will play into our next episode also. This sort of I don't know, this weird sense of the unknown where we're seeing it through the character's eyes, the unknown. But we know the truth, right? I kind of like that stuff, and of course I also love this epilogue-y stuff that he does in his writing.
Oh yeah, and it's sort of we've been trying to fast pace through the plot, but it's sort of his way of fast pacing through. Yes, this is important, but this isn't what we're focusing on. So we're gonna run through this really quickly so you understand where our characters are about to be in their lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, it's so cool.
I agree. So where are we? Okay, so let's talk about Roy. So this is of course during Willard's time. This is Willard's time.
Shortly after he had just gotten home.
Yeah. He meets Roy and his cousin, who's in the wheelchair. He had drank either like antifreeze or something to test his faith. This is a big thing for these like tent revival type preachers.
If anyone wants sort of an example, watch the Supernatural episode of the preacher who heals people when they think Dean's gonna die, and that's a good episode. But it's essentially what these guys are.
Yeah. And they may think that they're not doing this maliciously. They really do truly think that they're conduits for the Lord, and that they can, that testing their faith is truly important.
Going to these extremes of testing their faith, that that God will keep them safe.
Yeah. Or that
Of
God could
course.
give them abilities to do things.
Yeah, right. Well, especially with Roy.
Dude, the spider thing,
Oh,
that's wild.
I still, even though like they're CGI spiders, I was still like, oh, I hate that so much.
Yeah, it's so wild. Him dumping the spiders
Especially,
on his face.
especially the clump that breaks
Yes.
up after it comes down off of his face. Oh, hate that so much.
I know. And I like that, he has some sort of forethought to, after he gets bit, not see anybody for a while, because it's almost like it's almost proving he's not telling the truth, right? Because, yes, he might not be afraid of them anymore, and that is due to faith, but they're still dangerous, right? And I think that he was sort of playing with, they're not going to bite them, right? Like the snake wranglers, right? Or those snake preachers,
Right. Yeah.
which are also real. So, the idea of him, being locked up in this closet, waiting for the swelling to go down and waiting for a sign from God. And that's when he eventually gets the idea to kill Helen.
Yeah, because he thinks that now that the Lord has tested his faith by having the spider bite him, and he waited for an answer that he will be able to revive the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And decides to test that on his wife, Helen.
In the book, I didn't get very far, but I did get this far. And in the book, he talks about it with his cousin, and he said, well, I'm going to, because his cousin was super over it. He's just like, listen, God has abandoned us. We're not preachers anymore. We're whatever, man. Like, this is
really,
yeah. And he said, listen, man, like I've spoken to him, and he has given me the power to revive. I'm going to test it on a cat. And he said, a cat? Like, you got to do better than that, man. I'm not going to believe you. And so then that's when he decides to do it to Helen. And there's something about describing the screwdriver that goes into the neck is way worse than saying it, I think.
Yeah,
but that kind of comes out of nowhere, because you do see his cousin sharpening.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I'm kind of glad they tweaked that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But we get that visual clue of the cousins sharpening it, and you're thinking like, okay, maybe he's just bored and he's just sharpening a screwdriver.
Yeah, because he's in a wheelchair all day. What's he got going on?
Yeah, and then we just see it like right in the neck.
Man.
Oh.
And he really does believe he can resurrect her. And so I think that's where the sort of maliciousness kind of goes out the window, because it's not like he was just going to murder her, right?
Yeah, it's almost like in his eyes, he's performing some sort of kindness by testing this on Helen. Like, don't worry, because I'm going to revive you.
Right.
But obviously it does not work.
No. And so they bury her, and as they're on the run, Roy abandons his cousin.
Because he decides, I'm going to go home, see my daughter, and tell the police what happened.
Try to explain myself, right?
Yeah. And I love his cousin. You killed your wife with a screwdriver and thought you could revive her. You're going to sound like a crazy person.
Yeah. Because he kind of is a crazy person. So
yeah.
But on his way, he gets picked up by Carl and Sandy.
Yeah. And this is sort of another kind of theme of this movie, is these people who do these horrible acts. It's almost like the karmic retribution that they get their comeuppance.
Yeah, most of them do, or all of them do. I guess.
Pretty much all of them do, except for Arvin.
But Arvin's different. And I do like that. In the narrator, of course, explains that this is the early days of them killing people, and They weren't super smooth at it yet, and later they would pick better looking people. Number one, they photograph better. Number two, they're easier to coerce and
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's go ahead and just tell the audience. So what Carl and Sandy, mainly Carl, his idea was, his big brain idea was, they're going to pick up hitchhikers, convince them to have a picnic with them, sleep with Sandy, and then they're going to kill him, all while photographing the entire thing.
Right.
Some really, and the narrator even says some really sick shit.
Yeah.
Truth be told.
I do like that the narrator has an opinion.
Yeah.
In this, it's almost like, it's like the narrator in It. The narrator, uses, refers to themselves. It's like, I don't know where the boat ended up, or whatever. Like, it's sort of, I like that. I like that the narrator is, it's like, he's a real sick fuck,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back, so then they get Roy, and the only reason why Carl kills Roy immediately is because Roy, sort of in, not necessarily, in defiance, but I think in defiance of, he's reaffirming, like, you know what, I'm about to die. I'm not gonna go out. More, at least how I perceived it. He didn't want to go out more of a piece of shit than he already was,
right,
for killing his wife,
Yeah.
And so he refuses to sleep with Sandy, refuses to pretty much do anything. Yeah. And so Carl pretty much just goes ahead and kills him.
Yeah.
And
but still takes a picture.
Yeah.
As we will later find out, that he still kept it.
Yeah.
Because he liked to keep a record of all of them, even the failures, right?
And then pretty much after that, apart from Sebastian Stan's gross sheriff's deputy character, eventually becoming the sheriff of Mead. I
think so.
Yes, of Mead. He we don't really see him again until we catch up with Arvin and Lenora, when they're supposed to be 1918. Well, 16-17, my bad. Because Arvin should be 17. And then
Arvin is in his senior year, and then Lenora still has a couple of years to go.
Yeah. And this is when our baby boy Tom Holland comes into the play, and firstly crushes it. My man can crush a Southern accent. Like,
all the accents are pretty good. I think I mentioned it last time. That Robert Pattinson's accent.
Yeah, that you said that a lot of people gave him shit for it because they,
like, critics are like, it's terrible, but it's actually perfect.
Yeah. Ashley brought up a good point while we were watching it. That anytime he plays an American, he can just shift his voice, and she even heard that he even changes the pitch.
Yeah.
So like his voice is even higher pitched in this.
Yes, his voice is really high here.
Yeah.
He didn't tell the director he was doing that, by the way. So he did the accent himself. They didn't hire anybody.
Of course he didn't, because
he didn't even tell, and it's Antonio Campos, by the way.
Oh, okay.
I have it up. He until the first day of his character, of them shooting, that's when he heard it for the first time.
Really?
Yeah.
So which means he must have been working on it from pre-production
for a while,
to yeah.
And I like that he chose to do it high pitched, and for the dialect and for the time and for the place he's from, which is Tennessee. It's perfect. I mean, it's what they sounded like.
Oh yeah. And yeah. And
which is rad.
And we'll get there, but his character is I would say his character is the worst.
You think so?
I think his character is the worst.
But
of course,
so.
But Robert plays such a good villain.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't think he can, but he plays just a fantastic villain.
One of the, yeah, he's pretty awful. So, okay. Arvin and Lenora are grown, right? Like you said. And they're still living with his grandmother and his great uncle. And Lenora knows them because the grandmother really liked Helen and wanted Willard to marry Helen, right?
Yes.
And so they're like family friends, right?
Right.
And okay, so I don't know if this is like 1960s bullying, or if these guys are just like rapists in training. I don't know.
Oh,
but the bullies at the high school, it is wild.
Oh yeah, that they're gonna put a bag over her head just so, because one of them says just so I can get it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we should mention Lenora has grown up to be sort of like her mother. She's very religious. She loves reading her Bible. Very pious, as where Arvin has kind of grown in an opposite direction. Arvin is very cynical towards religion.
It's because it saw what religion did to his dad, right?
Yeah.
Religion drove his dad crazy, right? Or at least, again, not religion, whatever. This specific ideology that Willard had drove him crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
He's just very. Arvin is just a very angry young man.
Yeah.
But he's also very protective of Lenora, because he does see her as his, not just a stepsister, but as a sister, as blood, as he says, we're kin.
Yeah.
And he took that lesson. Yeah. Oh, sorry everyone. If you can hear my dog barking, my wife ordered us pizza. Jeremy knows this because he was literally watching us order it.
Yeah.
Anyway. But Arvin, we see Arvin take on these bullies. It doesn't really work out very well, but he never forgot the lesson his dad taught him: is you pick your moment. He takes them all on individually. He beats the shit out of one bully with a wrench after he pulls him out of a bus where he's trying to get it on with one of the schoolgirls. Pulls him out of a bus, beats the shit out of him with a wrench. The next guy, who's repairing a car, he slams the hood down on him.
And the other guy's in the car. So
the other guy's in the car, and the other guy's like trying to be like, hey man, like, I'm sorry. But Arvin doesn't take apologies.
No.
As like, oh, you're sorry. Okay, we're good now. No. Jams that Twinkie in his mouth, and then puts a bag over his head, and then puts a bag over the other guy's head, and just, man.
Yeah.
And as we learn later from Uncle Erskine, that he went so hard that probably more than likely those two guys ended up in the hospital.
Yeah.
Because a few months later, Uncle Erskine says like, oh yeah, he's getting better. I wish you wouldn't have gone so hard. And Arvin pretty much says like, well, they started it. Like, they were picking on Lenora and I ended it.
Yeah.
And because he says they haven't picked on her since. And it's almost like he kind of took this lesson really to heart. Yeah. Like, I'm going to find my moment and I'm going to end it. No ifs, ands, or buts. And Tom, again, as I said last week, Tom steals every scene because, at this point, if you hadn't seen the one-off, some of the other movies from his career, if you'd only seen the Marvel movies, you may not think like, oh, well, you may only see him as Spider-Man. I think this movie really cemented like, hey, I'm more than just Spider-Man. I can.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
But anyway, so yeah,
we haven't gotten to Robbie Pattinson yet.
Yeah, I was just about to say. So now at this point, but Robert Pattinson is replacing his, I think, uncle. Because he says it's my sister's son, so I would say that's his uncle. The local preacher in Mead, no, not Mead, Cold Creek. Because I guess their preacher isn't feeling too good, so Robert Pattinson comes in to be sort of like the interim preacher, and he's younger. Well, he's younger than the current preacher.
Yeah.
And he's just an asshole, dude.
He is kind of an asshole.
First we think, okay, he's just an asshole because they all have a very southern potluck. They all bring a dish. And since Arvin's grandma doesn't have a lot of money, she makes fried chicken livers. And he publicly embarrasses her. Of course, I think he only knew she was the one who made him. I don't think anyone else knew she made him, but publicly embarrasses her, saying how, like, pretty much that she butchered the dish and he's going to eat it to save everyone this horrible meal. But as Arvin says, I'm pretty sure he just wanted them all to himself.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a preacher.
Yeah.
And I find that so interesting that immediately from that first meeting, Arvin knew, like, okay, this guy ain't good news.
No, he's not good news. And he eventually, the Reverend, and his name is Reverend Preston
something or other,
Tigerton.
Yeah. Very, very southern name.
Yeah. Seduces Lenora.
Yeah.
By using religion to do so, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, saying how they're going to be with the Lord. But yeah, but not just seduces her, Jeremy. He gets her pregnant. Yeah. But he is so, I wouldn't say protective, but he is so, he sees he's done no wrong, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's just, and it's very ironic that he would give this sermon on delusion when he himself is being delusional.
Yeah.
About how, like, how can I be the father? We were with the Lord. And It just, of course, granted, it's just him being more of an asshole.
Yeah, he's being awful, right?
Yeah.
And making her feel stupid while, saving himself.
The word of the day, kids, is gaslighting.
And again, this is another one of those things that I really like in the writing, where when Lenora is putting the rope around her neck, she changes her mind. But slips while trying to get it off and ends up hanging herself anyway.
Yeah.
And no one will ever know that she changed her mind. The narrator says that, like, no one will know that she was right with the Lord at the end. And I love stuff like that. I don't know what it is, but
well, and I get it, because as you're kind of saying, it's like we, the audience, we are being invited in to something that almost like a secret. No one else is going to know. It's just our secret.
Yeah.
That we know that Lenora at the last second changed her mind. She wasn't going to kill herself, but panicking and slipping, no one else will ever know that. So, when Tom Holland finds her, which is a very brutal and heartbreaking scene, because he's trying to save her, but who knows how long she'd already been hanging there. He's trying to save her, trying to call for help. Tom will never know that she didn't intend to. Like, she had intent, but at the last second changed her mind. But and then this is sort of the, well, actually, it's the build up to the final straw. with Tom and the preacher. When he gets the news that she was pregnant. And I love that the deputy that tells him, it's like, you know, old Bruce? I don't know no Bruce. Well, he's a drunk, but he ain't no liar. And I love that because it's a very Southern thing. Like, he's a drunk, but he's not a liar.
Yeah.
And that's the final straw for Tom. Is not only did as he says it, my Lenora, not only did she kill herself, but she was pregnant, and he knows immediately it's that preacher.
Yeah.
And kind of, and again, with something that you love with the writing is the narrator tells us that he's already got this plan in motion, because he says he wanted desperately to tell them goodbye and where he was going, but decided not to in case the law came looking for him.
Right.
Which tells, which saying without saying is he's already got a plan and he knows what he's about to do. But before we talk about that, do you think we should catch up on Carl and Sandy?
Sure. Let's catch up on Carl and Sandy, because Carl and Sandy have a connection to another character that once he says it, you're like, wait, because you think that because he's the sheriff, right? That he's on to him or something, and then when he mentions that they're brother and sister, you're like, oh my god.
Sebastian Stan's character Lee, very Southern name also. Lee and Sandy are brother and sister, and Lee, as we see in the flashback, is a very corrupt cop who somehow weaseled his way into becoming sheriff. He's up for re-election, and he can't have anything tarnishing him. And the biggest thing on his plate right now is there's a rumor going around that Sandy's a whore.
Yeah.
Which, technically she is.
Yeah, she is. It's just, he's missing that second part.
Yeah, he's missing the part of why she's a whore.
Yeah, and the murders,
Yeah. And we also see that Lee is in the pocket of a local crime lord, I guess.
Yeah, organized crime syndicate. Yeah.
Yeah, with Leroy. And he's not only trying to protect his sister, but he's also trying to protect his position, because as the narrator says, if people think the sheriff's sister is a whore, well, then they're going to learn about the cash. They're going to learn about him looking the other way with certain things, and he's going to lose being the sheriff. He's going to lose having this position of power where he essentially makes the rules.
Yeah.
And so then he decides, Lee decides to take matters in his own hands, and he kills Leroy. Pretty much because Leroy threatened to, I wouldn't say blackmail, but he threatened to pretty much expose everything if Lee didn't back off.
Yeah.
And Lee pretty much said, nuts to that.
I'm obsessed with his right-hand man, Bobo McDaniels.
Yeah.
His forearms
are so big.
Were bigger than my legs, which isn't hard to do. I have very small legs, but he this guy's strike. I've seen him in other things before, like The Leftovers and things like that. But every time I see that actor, I was like, Jesus, man.
I know.
He's gigantic.
And I love how Sebastian Stan kills him, and we know the audience. We know Sebastian Stan's about to do something because he's zipping up his coat to a certain point.
Yeah.
And then he wraps the gun in a towel, and you're like, oh, he's about to do something.
Yeah.
And I think it's so cool that he essentially made a homemade silencer by wrapping the gun in a towel. Which I don't know how well that would work in real life.
As we see in The Godfather Part 2, it could catch on fire. So shout out to Godfather Part 2. Shout out to Robert De Niro
Yeah.
And shout out to the whole flashback sequences of Vito Corleone. Anyway, go
ahead. But then, so while Lee's dealing with all this, Sandy she's done doing, she after, so let's do a little backtracking here, because it's 1965. So they probably started, let's just say a year after they met, so 1951.
Sure.
So 14 years of doing this, of well, no, it would be at least, so 15 years, because they would have had to start years. Yeah, so 15 years of doing this. Sandy's done, and she's not only done, but she's also been calling, leaving anonymous tips, essentially, about where to find the bodies. And Ashley brought up a good point. She's like, oh, it's 1965, they can't trace the call.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, exactly. But Sandy's just done. And but Carl, most serial murders, they're not just gonna just stop because
this is like Carl's favorite thing in the world to do. You
know? So anyway, so let's go back to Tom Holland now.
Okay.
And then we can sort of kind of wrap up the plot, because at this point,
because then things will converge then, I think. Once
yeah. So Tom finally confronts Preston. Arvin confronts Preston, and I love how he does it. He's acting like he's coming in for a confessional, but then he starts to lay on these little clues, and we totally forgot that Arvin's got a gun, and not only just a gun that his father brought back from World War II.
Yeah.
And he I do like how when he finally pulls the gun on Preston, he almost gives Preston a chance to sort of explain himself. Like Tom was still 100% going to kill him.
Yeah, of course.
But it was almost like, I want you to admit it to me that you got my sister pregnant and you're the reason she killed herself. But Preston's sticking to his story that she was delusional, that someone else did this to her, and Tom ain't buying it.
No.
And spoilers, Tom kills him.
Yeah.
Pretty brutally. The first shot he gets off goes through his hand, but then while he's kind of writhing in pain, Tom gets one in the chest and then one in the head, and then very smartly picks up the shells.
Yeah. Haley was like, what is he doing? I was picking up the casings.
Yeah. Picking up the casings, and then leaves evidence of Preston's dealings and why he is now dead.
Yeah.
So he hightails it out of there, and as the narrator says, he has this sudden urge to essentially go home to knock him stiff. And his car breaks down, and he gets picked up by Sandy and Carl. And so, I think this is the one time in the movie they were wanting the audience to feel like, oh no.
Yeah.
But Arvin, clocking that Carl had a gun, is already preemptively like getting ready, kills Carl, and really doesn't want to kill Sandy. But
no, and Sandy's just scared,
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is a really cool narrative trick. I mean, it's not a trick. I mean, but the narrative device that they're using when essentially she misses, right? She had him point blank, and you're like, how did she miss? She didn't miss. It was full of blanks.
Carl, being a paranoid serial killer, replaced her bullets with blanks.
Yeah.
So had he not done that, she would have gotten Arvin.
Yeah.
But I love that. I love the line, she never stood a chance.
Yeah.
So Arvin collects enough. He grabs some money, grabs the undeveloped real cans, and makes it to knock him stiff. And then just like you're saying, this is when everything's converging. So then Lee gets the call that they found his sister. And he's sad for a moment, and then it's like, oh my God, once word gets out that my sister's dead, they're going to come to her place.
Yeah.
Finds all the evidence of all the murders.
Yeah.
Burns it all. And then gets word from Coal Creek that Arvin was the one who killed the preacher and that he might be headed that way. And I and I love the dispatcher or the sheriff who's talking to him. He's like, yeah, he killed the preacher, but it seems like he might have had it coming.
Yeah.
Almost like they're saying like, hey, like, because I love, he's like, he's not dangerous.
From what I understand, that preacher had it coming,
yeah. And then we get one of my favorite parts of the movie is because the plot finally comes full circle. Arvin lives up to his 8-year promise and buries his dog Jack.
Yeah.
Because he makes that promise after his mom's funeral that he's going to take Jack down and he's going to give him a proper burial.
Yep.
So he fulfills the promise and buries, of course, all he is bones now, but he buries Jack.
Yeah.
And then this is where he has sort of a standoff with Lee.
Yeah.
And explains to Lee that he didn't want to do it. They gave him no choice. He didn't want to kill his sister and kill Carl. And Arvin, in the span of 24 hours, kills 4 people.
Yeah.
But really, he makes it out unscathed because Sebastian Stan also had him point blank with a shotgun, but still makes it out. And he buries his dad's gun and gets picked up by he's hitchhiking, gets picked up, and finally sleeps.
I like the, this is probably my favorite moment in the film is the narration over him getting picked up in that VW, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saying that he's not sure what's past and what's future. He's not sure, all these moments are whirling around in his head as he's trying not to fall asleep and, thinking back on what he's done and looking forward to what he will do and what he can do or what he should do. Mm-hmm. Remembering his father, remembering his grandmother and all that. It's great writing.
Oh yeah. And I just love but he's just now happy to get some rest. And then it's a great movie, man. Like I get why critics think it's too dark, because it is, like the Rotten Tomatoes review says like it's a descent into darkness. Yeah. And I agree. And yeah, it is unrelenting because all these terrible things just keep happening and keep happening and keep happening. Yeah. But as we said at the beginning of this episode, it's almost like all these terrible things are centered around Arvin. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like, yeah, even though he does some terrible things himself, he's doing them because there is no other choice, because mm-hmm. these people are worse. Yeah. Sort of thing,
Yeah. He's trying to take control of his life back, I guess. Mm-hmm. Since, with the whole religion thing as well, like religion has played such a negative part in his life, starting with his dad and then with mm-hmm. his preacher, and even, with Carl and Sandy, there was that line of dialogue that the narrator has where, Carl's not a religious man, but he kind of is, because this is sort of his religious experience. Mm-hmm. The kidnapping and murdering of these people. I mean, mm-hmm. kidnapping is in quotes, but you get what I'm saying.
No, yeah.
This is his way of expressing his religious ideologies.
Yeah.
And so it's Arvin is just trying to find peace. Yeah.
And something I love, and that's why I love the final confrontation between him and Lee, is right before it happens, he does finally make peace and forgive his father. And that's something Lenore asked him. She said, if he were alive, do you think you could forgive him? And Arvin doesn't really answer the question, but he's probably thinking like, no, I would never forgive him. Mm-hmm. And I love the line from the narrator is now standing in his father's church.
Yeah.
He does find this like idea of like, I'm sad that my father sacrificed my dog, but he loved my mom and he was going to do anything he can to save her. And, right. and it's a really nice moment of peace, then followed up by an act of violence.
Right.
But it, and I think that's another central theme of this movie is finding peace in your life some way and in some form,
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I'm glad you were cool with this one, because I know you probably really wanted to talk about Cherry.
Yeah, well, what's funny is, I would have been more focused. I mean, we'll still probably do Cherry
eventually 100%. In the future, but
I'm going to be more preoccupied in defending Cherry more than I am, because the reviews are pretty bad for Cherry. And
I really don't like
it. People really didn't like it, and there are moments where I'm like, I get it, but also it's just like it's a cool way to tell this story, right? Mm-hmm. With Cherry. But anyway, we'll whatever. That's a year from now. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. So Jeremy, are you ready to wrap up?
Yes, I am. It was really cool to get to do this one. It was a fun excuse to watch it again.
Yeah.
Love the performances, love the cast. Love the the narration is so spot on, man. I love it. And the fact that I'm one of these, I don't know if there are many of us, probably dozens of us, that if the author says it's good, there's no more complaining, right? Because, or at least then you don't like the book either, right? So these people who didn't like this movie wouldn't like the book, I don't think, either, because the book is super dark. As far as I've gotten in it, Zach, my very good buddy of mine, whom we've talked about on the show before, he read the book and he said, dude, it makes the movie look like a Disney Channel movie. Like he says, he's like, dude, the book is brutal. And I was like, I gotta listen to it, bro.
Yeah, I told Ashley, I was telling Ashley after we finished the movie, I was like, I think I want to read the book now, because I do like that the book is, kind of talking, as we've mentioned, I love things in chapters. I love that the book is split into 7 parts.
Yeah.
Which I think is so cool. Such a rad way to tell a story.
And and again, it might just have something to do with, it might be the same, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's going to be anything added to it, but even if it's just the same and he's just describing things to you, right? Like, maybe instead of insinuating, luring a hitchhiker into your car and then, having them have sex with Sadie and then killing them, if you describe every little detail of it, it's going to be way worse.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Right? And especially in that montage, this could be a good, oops, I forgot, in one of the montage sequences of the murders, right? There's one where they cut his penis off. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah,
or at least mutilated it.
Yeah, it's the part where the narrator calls Carl a sick fuck.
Yeah.
Because it's that army guy they picked up.
Yeah.
It's very brief, very quick. Yeah. But it's because Carl, is pinning his arms down because Carl's sort of sitting on his neck to take a photo of him. Yeah, but it's very quick, and they did something to him. Yeah.
I mean, oh God. I mean, and just imagining listening to someone describe them either doing it or the
Or
aftermath of it.
yeah.
You know, but I'm
Oh
gonna
yeah.
get there eventually. So
Yeah. Yeah, man. I don't think I have any oops I forgots, but it's hard to believe now that we are now at the end of season series.
yeah,
I was telling mom like, yeah, I was like, we're gonna be doing the devil all the time, and then we're gonna be on the end of season series. And she was like, it's the end of the season already. And I was like, yeah. Like,
yeah. I mean, our arbitrary rules say that it's the end of the season, and
yeah.
so
And I feel like the reason why this season has taken so long, because I feel like we've taken a little bit more breaks in this
yeah,
season than we have in past breaks.
I agree.
But I mean, we make the rules, so
We
who
make the
cares?
rules. Yeah, this is our show. I don't care.
So Jeremy, what are we gonna talk about next week? Of course, I already know,
Yeah,
but
I know you know.
what are we gonna talk about next week for part one of our end of season series?
So, I was thinking about it, and I was trying to get it to fit the theme, my
Uh-huh.
theme of strange films, right?
Strange films, yeah.
And I couldn't do it because I was like, we could do a bunch of like Kaufman stuff. But I'm like, no, I like to do those one at a time. So we're not gonna do Kaufman. I don't want to do a bunch of Buñuel stuff, even though I do have the Criterion set that they recently did for Louis Buñuel.
Yeah.
But I was like, that won't work. I don't want to do that one. And so I was like, you know what? I'm not going to fit it with the theme. It's just going to be its own thing. A trilogy that I love very, very much.
That you have told me about for forever to get,
yeah.
and I finally got it.
Yep.
So
we're doing Richard Linklater's The Before trilogy.
nice.
So Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight.
Yeah. I would you say that these movies were indirectly a precursor to Boyhood?
Maybe.
Well, I say
he was
indirectly.
doing them at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Apart from Sunrise, because Sunrise was first, and then the other two he was doing them at the same time. So I don't know, maybe. It is
now he's
sort
working
of
on that new 20-year movie.
Yeah. It's got the same sort of flow, the same sort of style where it seems just so natural and down to earth, and nothing flashy. We're just talking, right? So yeah, he probably was like, I could probably do this, but tell a more long form story.
Yeah, because if we haven't talked about it enough, because we haven't done this will be our first Linklater episode.
Oh, that's a shame. I can't believe we waited this long.
Because Linklater, because I was really curious, and so I was looking up some information about this trilogy. Collectively, I think they only had a budget, like, of all three movies, only had a budget of $8 million.
Yeah.
And they collectively grossed over $48 million.
Yeah,
and I was telling Ashley, I was like, that proves that Linklater doesn't need a big budget to make a good movie.
No, he never has.
Yeah. It is a little sad that this will be our first Linklater episode, but
I know.
But now that means this gets to open up the floodgates to, Dazed and Confused and Slacker and Boyhood.
Yeah.
Because that's on my Criterion wish list as well.
And Bad News Bears. And
oh my god, I didn't realize he did that, and so I was just kind of curious. So I was like looking through his credits, and I was like, oh my god, he did Bad
or
News
A Scanner Darkly would actually be a good one.
Oh yeah, because I've tried to watch that movie like 3 times and I just can't get into it. But I would be willing to do it again.
Yeah.
But I'm excited,
man. One of the stories about which I'm not going to get into, but it plays into some of the themes in this film that we just did. It's really sad. One of the little tidbits I found is pretty sad about the inspiration for this movie.
Oh yeah.
And I love that he did 3 more. They're each 9 years apart.
Yeah,
I don't want him. I don't want him to do another one, and he's already missed the deadline, so I don't think he's going to do another one because that would have been 2021 when he needed to do another one.
Yeah, I don't think he will, mainly because I think I think he really is focused on that 20-year movie, which is just so wild.
But if he does it like he did Boyhood,
I've heard
do other things while he does that. You know,
I've heard that they're going to meet like ever so often, film, and then they'll fuck off and meet each other again for another X amount of time.
Yep, and a fellow Texan.
Yeah.
At the time, you can only bind someone to a 7-year contract, and so he'll have to do it a couple of times.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still the rule, but
maybe
in Texas anyway.
But
anyway, so you said next week. Are we going to be virtually again next week? Because I know you're going to be out of town.
We will not be virtually next week, but unfortunately, it will not be actually next week because I will be out of town for the recording of it. So we won't record until the week after that. So everyone, we say next week, but for you, it'll be 2 weeks. So
yeah. Well, for us, it'll be 2 weeks.
Yeah, for us, it'll be 2 weeks too. But we won't be virtual again. So, but yeah, man, I'm excited for Before Sunrise.
Me too.
So we hope everyone enjoyed The Devil All the Time, and we'll see you next week for part 1 of the Before trilogy, Before Sunrise.